Joining me now from Vancouver is Nick Stember. He's a translator and historian of Chinese comics. And Nick, let's start there. What's the potential here? How big is this?
Oh, I think it's huge. I think if you look at these, it's a very market-savvy approach. The two comics that they've launched, so between NetEase and Marvel here, one of them is a kind of a tomb raider, tomb robbing story. For Western viewers, you'd think of something maybe like Indiana Jones or Lara Croft. But then the other one is kind of more of a traditional superhero approach, right? So you have this flying superhero Arrow who flies around a city and battles monsters.
And
I think the potential here is huge.
Yeah, you were talking about Lara Croft. I mean, those are kind of Western sensibility stories that we can identify, but it can't be one size fits all. Just coming up with a name isn't enough, but characteristics. These superheroes, are they going to be rooted in Chinese mythology, or are they going to be a blend, where West meets East in terms of like themes, like you were talking about in a sense?
Right. So I think if I was, I've looked at the two comics that have already been released. I've looked at the first few chapters, and if you look at especially the Three Sovereigns, so the Warriors of the Three Sovereigns, which is the tomb robbing one. It ends actually with a time travel segment. So they go back in time, apparently to the period of the Three Sovereigns, which is a mythological period in China, about 300 or 3000 BC, so 3000 2000 BC. And you actually have this big splash panel in the last chapter, which shows apparently it shows Nuwa and Fuxi and Shennong, who are the three sovereigns, right? So these characters who introduced farming, they introduced hunting, they introduced all of the things that make a civilization possible.
You're a historian of Chinese comics. How are these different from previous Chinese superheroes, would you say?
Well, I think China, I was thinking about this a lot, and in China, they don't really have the same tradition of superheroes, right? So in China, the most obvious example would be the Monkey King. But the Monkey King, his origin story is very different from a Western superhero. So the Monkey King was born in a stone egg, and then he journeys to the West, right? So he goes and gets the Buddhist scriptures, and he brings them back with his team of friends. But in the Western tradition, the superhero generally is somebody who is just a normal person who has some sort of accident or falls into some sort of trap. And then they get these superpowers and they use them to fight evil. So it's a very different tradition, I think. And I think that's what's really interesting about these projects, is that they're bringing together a Chinese approach, a Chinese traditional approach, and with more of a Western kind of Marvel spin on it.
And Nick, I've got to ask you the same question Phil was asking the interviewee. Does it have the potential to make it on the big screen? Can this translate?
Oh, absolutely. I think that especially if you look at Arrow, Arrow, the second one, I think is especially appropriate for the big screen because it has these kind of urban scenes. You could almost see some crossovers maybe with Fantastic Four. One of the characters in Arrow actually looks a little bit like The Thing. So I think that's something that would be a natural kind of connection. Maybe also Spider-Man is a very urban comic, so that would work very well. Iron Man, again, is another one that would work well with this urban theme. I think with the first one, the Warriors of the Three Sovereigns, it might almost work better as a television show. And you've actually seen that with some of the tomb robbing series that are very popular in China. So Journal of a Tomb Robber, Damu Buji, is a series that has been adapted into a TV show and has done very well. So I think you can see this maybe live action or also cartoons.
Right. Well, Nick, we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time. But thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.